The following episode is brought to you by FFB Cast. Stay tuned for your very own custom podcast, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
You are listening to the L-Town Dynasty League Football Podcast, brought to you by FFB Cast. I am your host, Lou Brunson, and today we are recording the Week 13 episode where we will break down this pivotal week as we head into the playoffs. Coming into Week 13, the first and second seeds were already locked up, with the Norfolk Red Storm coming in, already having locked up the first seed, and the Prime Timers already locking up the second seed. However, there were 4 teams at 7-5. Each of them would have the opportunity to go to 8-5 and have that home field advantage in the first round of the playoffs. In this league, home field advantage gets you a 1-point advantage over your opponent. So with that, we get to our first matchup of the week, the Norfolk Red Storm against the Bluegrass Desperados. Coming into the matchup, the Red Storm would look to be the heavy favorite here, as they came in with an 11-1 record. However, the Bluegrass Desperados had actually scored the second most points of any team in the league, so this was no walkover. As it turned out, the Bluegrass Desperados ran all over the Red Storm, 121 to 88.4. At the end of the day, it came down to the Norfolk Red Storm really suffering from not having their studs step up this week. The stack of Drew Brees and Alvin Kamara just did not come through this week. The Cowboys defense really was able to clamp down on the Saints and keep their heavy hitters from performing. Add to that David Johnson's lackluster performance this week despite Arizona's win in Green Bay, and there was really no catching a team when Todd Gurley returns to form. In fact, the running backs for Bluegrass Desperados outscored the Norfolk Red Storm's running backs by a count of 39.5 to 18.9. That kind of difference just is so great in this kind of matchup when two teams are so evenly matched. Bluegrass Desperados has really done a very good job in developing their roster to be able to compete this late in the season with guys like Josh Adams and Gus Edwards able to step in and pick up the slack for running back for Bluegrass Desperados, because although Gurley is a great running back one, that running back 2 spot can be oh so troublesome when you have guys like LaShawn McCoy and Kenyon Drake who are just so inconsistent week in and week out. What's more, Bluegrass was able to survive a 2.8 point output from stud wide receiver Julio Jones. And although the wide receivers were outscored 20.8 to 29 flat, that advantage at running back was just so great, Norfolk just couldn't keep up. That gave Bluegrass a much-needed win heading into the playoffs and a great foot up on that home field advantage. Up next, we had our number 2 seed that was locked in already against the World War champions. Once again, this was a matchup of 2 very different teams. Prime Timers coming in already having locked up the second seed no matter what the outcome was of this game, and World War Champions having already been eliminated from the playoffs. World War Champions has been able to rely week in and week out on guys such as Jared Goff and Christian McCaffrey, as well as outstanding tight end George Kittle. Unfortunately this week, World War Champions just couldn't put it all together, as Goff had one of his few off weeks, as well as Juju Smith-Schuster. Pittsburgh's sophomore stud wide receiver only put up 7.9 points this week. So although Christian McCaffrey has been his normal outstanding self, he was not able to carry World War champions to victory. Unfortunately, Wendell Smallwood put up that 0, which again was just too much to overcome for World War champion. Prime Timers didn't really have any standout performances other than Fairburn, their kicker, who put up 21 points from that kicker position, which you gotta love kickers when they do that for you. So even though World War champions had Justin Tucker put up 17 themselves, that 21 from Fairburn was enough to put Prime Timers just up and over the top, thanks to the solid, if unspectacular performances of the rest of his team, as Prime Timers took this matchup 101.8 to 89.7. Unfortunately, World War Champions has just been hit so hard by injuries this year, with AJ Green going down, T.Y. Hilton being in and out, Alex Collins going to IR, Will Fuller going to IR. Although World War Champions did make an interesting decision, leaving Chris Godwin on his bench, who has been outstanding with Deshaun Jackson being scaled back in Tampa Bay. Although he decided to roll with Rashad Penny in his flex, who did do fairly well with 12.5 points. Sterling Shepard as his wide receiver 2 could have definitely been replaced by Goodwin and would have actually been enough to get the win for World War Champions, kicking off his end of the season the right way and hopefully carrying that momentum into the next season. Our next matchup of the week was the Charlotte Iron Skillets against Team Outlaw. Our lone matchup that was 7-5 against 7-5. This matchup would be who would get that home field advantage for the first round of the playoffs. As it turns out, Team Outlaw took this one with a score of 126.9 to 109.5. In fact, Team Outlaw came with the biggest score of the week. One of the most crucial weeks as we head into the playoffs here. He was led from his flex spot, believe it or not, by Tarek Cohen, throwing up that 31.6. And he has just come on so hard as Jordan Howard has gotten scaled back more and more throughout the season. So being able to rely on Cohen, in addition to the week in and week out studs of Antonio Brown, that's almost 80 points just between those three. And unfortunately, the Charlotte Iron Skillets got bit with Christian Kirk going down and ended up being put on IR. So although the stud running backs of Joe Mixon and Saquon Barkley have done well for the Charlotte Iron Skillets throughout the course of the year, especially when that third running back, Dalvin Cook, can be paired with them. Again, solid performance from all three, but none had that outstanding performance that we've come to know, especially from Saquon Barkley, and we were hoping to see by this point from Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook. As we know, the Patriots are so good at limiting your favorite options on offense. With no real standout performances aside from Jameis Winston, who, since he's come back and replaced Ryan Fitzpatrick, has been quietly impressive. He didn't put up the eye-popping numbers this week, but 21.8 points from Jameis Winston, which after he'd been benched not once but twice for Ryan Fitzpatrick throughout the course of the year, 21 points from Winston at this point in the season, you can't discount that. With Andrew Luck on the other side on Team Outlaw putting up his worst effort of the season at 5.6, it's impressive that Team Outlaw was able to roll through this matchup the way that he did. Say neither team really had big lineup questions throughout the course of the week. Mohamed Sanu and Christian Kirk really reaching on wide receivers at this point in the season for the Charlotte Iron Skillets, which is unfortunate. John Brown also getting shut out this week with the goose egg. As Jackson has taken over there in Baltimore, it's been great for Jackson and the running game in Baltimore, but has taken a toll on the passing game on the whole. With Sammy Watkins being hurt, Team Outlaw decided to roll with Chris Conley this week, and he had a solid, if unspectacular, performance, putting up 10 points in that 40-33 win over Oakland. Team Outlaw really has done well with their depth, being able to play Conley over former stalwarts like Doug Baldwin, having Sammy Watkins on the bench, and even Cortland Sutton, who has been the hot rookie this year and with the dwindling options in Denver, looks to be a great potential option throughout the playoffs, as well as Golden Tate, who finally has shown signs of life in Philadelphia. Our final 7-5 team coming into the week, the Legion of Boom, faced off against the Abingdon Alcoholics. This was a tough matchup, as even though the Abingdon Alcoholics did not have the record, standing at 3-9 coming into the week, they have been putting up points and have the horses in their lineup to get it done on any given week. That's exactly the kind of team you don't want to be playing spoiler and have to play at the end of the season the way the Legion of Boom did. As it turns out, the Legion of Boom got bit, 118.9 to 110.8. So although they were able to get 18 points from their defense, another 14 from their kicker, despite 8 from the Alcoholics defense and only 5 from their kicker, they still fell thanks to who else but Patrick Mahomes. Rebounds from his first and really only lackluster performance of the year to come back strong and throw up that 35.1, outscoring the Legion of Boom's quarterback Deshaun Watson by almost 22 points. And then you have Keenan Allen being the target hog while Melvin Gordon is out. It was just too much for the Legion of Boom to overcome, despite having James Conner and Michael Thomas, who have been studs throughout the course of the year, as well as the recently resurgent Lamar Miller putting up points left and right. It just wasn't quite enough to get him over that hump. It will be a tough call this week for the Legion of Boom, as James Conner has been already declared out for the upcoming week. Luckily, he does have Leonard Fournette to fall back on, and hopefully Kerryon Johnson if he's able to advance in the playoffs. Although the Alcoholics have been eliminated from playoff contention even coming into the week, they do look to have some good young talent on their team between Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Jones, Duke Johnson, Dak Prescott, OJ Howard, Darius Geis. All of these guys look to take the Alcoholics into the future. So even though 2018 probably did not end up the way the Alcoholics were hoping, 2019 looks to have a lot of promise for the Alcoholic. That brings us to the first of our two matchups that featured two teams who were already eliminated from the playoffs, the California Communists and the Sexington Panthers. The Communists came in at 5-7 with the Panthers at 2-10. Unfortunately for the Panthers, they put up the second lowest point total of the week at 55.8, and the California Communists rolled out with 115.6, blasting the Panthers out of the water in the biggest point differential of Week 13. The Communists have been able to ride late season heroes Lamar Jackson, Nick Chubb, and Spencer Ware, as well as the resurgent Amari Cooper, to victory this week. Season stalwart Travis Kelce paced the Communists with 34.8 points from a tight end, which, when your opposing tight end puts up the golden goose egg, there's not much that can be done beyond that. The Communists have been able to rebound from losing Kareem Hunt and Marvin Jones, so although their season is not ending up the way that they were looking for, they are set up nicely with the young guns of Lamar Jackson and Nick Chubb, as well as Travis Kelce, Amari Cooper, and that Bears defense, which week in and week out is always a monster of the Midway. Although the Sexington Panthers are winding down 2018 with a whimper instead of the roar that they were hoping, they do get to look to the future with promising youngsters like Anthony Miller and Dante Pettis. They have to hope that Derrick Henry continues to eat into Dion Lewis's work, as well as Ronald Jones developing more in Tampa Bay to get more and more work. If those young guys are able to develop and get some meaningful playing time for the Sexington Panthers, they look like they could be a contending team in 2019, even if they brought up the back of the pack in 2018. That brings us to our final matchup of Week 13, with another two teams that were fully eliminated from the playoffs coming into Week 13. The Green Valley Groundhogs at the A-Town's You Are Done Sun. The Groundhogs came into Week 13 at 5-7, tied with A-Town, also at 5-7. So who would win in this final week for pride in the regular season? As it turned out, the Green Valley Groundhogs really didn't show up to play, with not a single player on their team cracking 10 points, as they put up the lowest score of the week at 48.3, and A-Town runs away with this one, 91.9 to that 48.3. There was really nobody on the Groundhogs that did anything of note in a good way, unfortunately. Although Week 13 darling Austin Eckler was able to get 6.8 points, it wasn't enough to tip the scale. That running back spot looks to have been so problematic for the Groundhogs throughout the course of the year, as Frank Gore, Father Time himself, put up 3.6. 10.4 points total from the running back position for the Groundhogs. Meanwhile, A-Town has Philip Lindsay, who puts up 29.4 points all by himself Week 13. So even though Sony Michael and Adam Thielen didn't have their great weeks that we've come to know and expect from them, A-Town was still able to run away with this matchup. Although 2018 didn't work out for either of these teams the way they would have wanted, both teams have young talent on their squads that can make 2019 a better year for them. Groundhogs can roll out names like Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs, Evan Ingram, and Calvin Ridley. When paired with Matt Ryan, this is a team that, with some running back luck, can be a contender in 2019. And then you have A-Town, who has the always solid Aaron Rodgers, which, with the firing of Mike McCarthy, he will have a great idea of what he's looking at next year and the potential of Aaron Rodgers in that Packers defense. And when you compare him with a wide receiver like Devontae Adams And then the Minnesota darling, Adam Thielen, you've already got the solid start to a team. If Philip Lindsay and Sony Michel can continue what they've built their rookie years, A-Town looks like they can roll into 2019 and start taking names. Especially when you've got guys like Corey Davis, James White, and Mitchell Trubisky on your bench. A-Town has plenty of depth as he heads into the offseason and 2019. So with that said, what does our playoff picture look like? Well, as we said, the Norfolk Red Storm and the Prime Timers have earned those week 1 buys, those all-important buys. So guys, rest your players. Make sure they don't get hurt. Enjoy that time off so that way you can be ready to go week 2 of the playoffs. Week 1, we have the Legion of Boom at Team Outlaw. Don't forget, because Team Outlaw was able to win and finish the regular season at 8-5, they start out with a 1-point advantage over the Legion of Boom. Any advantage, no matter how small, is crucial when it comes to these playoff matchups. The Charlotte Iron Skillets travel to the Bluegrass Desperados as well, where the Desperados were able to lock up that Week 13 win, which got them that 1-point advantage as they go into the playoffs. So now we're going to take a look at some players who could help some of these teams, not just for the playoffs, but also those teams that have fallen out of contention of the playoffs and are just playing for 2019 at this point. Now, as you can imagine, all waiver wires are pretty well picked over by this point in the season. And in a 1-quarterback league, it's easy to find quarterbacks on the waiver wire at any given point in time. But one name that you can't discount is Josh Allen out of Buffalo. Now, yes, he's not a pretty quarterback, but this is a guy who, since he's come back from injury, has put up 25.1 and 31.1 points from the quarterback position. He gets the Jets, the Lions, and the Patriots in the next 3 weeks. These are not slouches for defenses, in no way. But the thing that Josh Allen offers that some of these other quarterbacks don't is rushing. He's had over 100 yards rushing in each of the last 2 games. He's just as likely to get you -2 as he is to get you 32. But if you're looking for that advantage and that guy that could tilt the scales in your favor, especially if you're an underdog, Josh Allen is that guy that could be that difference maker. Running backs are all picked over at this point. Even wide receivers, there's not going to be that much out there. Not those impactful guys that are going to come in and start for a playoff team. But Josh Allen is that guy to keep an eye on. With that said, there are some depth type running backs out there that could make an impact in the playoffs. CJ Anderson was just signed to the Oakland Raiders, and although he hasn't done anything this year, he's a guy that if John Gruden decides, okay, we've seen enough of Doug Martin and his fumbling, which he has done a lot, CJ Anderson could be that guy that could run wild in the playoffs. Maybe not your 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, but if you just need someone to plug in, CJ Anderson could be that guy for you that could end up just tipping the scales just enough. He's not a guy that you're going to take into 2019 and feel good about, but this week he plays Pittsburgh, and in week 15 he plays Cincinnati. Cincinnati has one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and if you're looking for that leg up, especially if you're a heavy favorite this week, CJ Anderson could be that guy that could tip the scales for you even more going into your next week. Another guy with promise is Mike Davis. He hasn't seen anything lately. However, he has still been the running back in Seattle that has been there every single time his name has been called and has produced. Chris Carson gets dinged up before Rashard Penny is ready to step in. Mike Davis steps up. Rashard Penny gets dinged up as well. Mike Davis steps in. It's going to take a couple of injuries for Mike Davis to matter. Make no mistake about it. Chris Carson is running well. Rashard Penny has been seeing more play. Mike Davis is clearly the 1C in this committee. But he needs to be on every team's speed dial as these playoffs unfold, especially if one of those first guys gets hurt. Wide receivers are another group that are very well picked over. At this point in the year, we know who's going to produce and who's not. So there really isn't much out there at this point that you can plug and play reliably, but there are guys out there who, thanks to some changing situations in front of them, could end up being values not only into the playoffs this year, but potentially for 2019 as well. One of those guys is Buffalo's own Robert Foster, who is not a target hog and is not in a high volume passing offense. So his variance is going to be very high. He has a low floor, but also a higher ceiling. He's a speedster, and with Kelvin Benjamin and Andre Holmes getting cut by the Buffalo Bills, he suddenly has nobody in front of him to take away those snaps and those targets. Although Geronimo Allison's time in Green Bay in 2018 was cut short by a trip to IR earlier in the year, he's a restricted free agent this year and could be brought back to Green Bay, as they have not shown to have anything reliable beyond Davante Adams to this point. Now, they have a lot of young wide receivers in Green Bay between Jamon Moore, Equanimous St. Brown, as well as everybody's preseason favorite, Jake Kumerow. However, it remains to be seen if any of them are actual NFL-worthy and NFL-level wide receivers, where Geronimo Allison has shown it. With Randall Cobb likely on his way out of Green Bay after this year, he's a name to keep your eye on as you transition from the 2018 to 2019 season. Another name to take a look at and keep an eye on is Quincy Enunwa. There are no guarantees when it comes to that New York Jets passing game, as we know. Whether it's been Sam Darnold or Josh McCown throughout the course of the year, their passing game has been up and down with very little to show for it for most of the year. Quincy Enunwa is a guy who came off of a huge injury last year and has been again dinged up this year. However, with that questionable quarterback play that's happened in New York, he could end up going somewhere and being a quality piece for a team in need of that guy that's maybe not a primary receiver, but going to a place like an Indianapolis, a San Francisco, that needs just someone else to be able to catch the ball and could end up surprising some people. Maybe not someone you're going to start week one, but important depth throughout the course of the year as you go through 2019, someone to help with those bye weeks and those injuries that we know they pop up and hurt everyone. As the teams of the L-Town Dynasty Football League get ready for the first week of the playoffs in Week 14, look for the Bluegrass Desperados to make some noise throughout the playoffs. Although they didn't get one of the first-round byes that went to the Norfolk Red Storm and the Prime Timers, the Bluegrass Desperados were able to put up the second overall highest point total over the course of the regular season with 1572. Almost 100 points more than the number one overall seed Norfolk Red Storm. There are really three teams that have been really head and shoulders above as far as points scored throughout the regular season. In the Prime Timers, far and away leading the way with 1657 points scored, followed by the Bluegrass Desperados at 1572, and then the Legion of Boom at 1534. Those are the only three teams in the playoffs that scored over 1,500 points over the course of the regular season. However, quick shout out to the World War champions, who are the only other team to put up over 1,500 points on the year with 1,508. However, with a 4-6 record, unfortunately, they'll be sitting home throughout the playoffs, but it does bode well for them as they look forward to the 2019 season. Our last three playoff teams, the Norfolk Red Storm, A-Towns, You Are Done, Son, and Team Outlaw, all look to be strong teams as well, even if they didn't put up those overall gaudy point numbers that the others did. The Prime Timers look to be the overall favorite going into the playoffs. However, they do have injury concerns that they're going to need to sort out. Luckily, they have that first week bye, so that way they can sit back, hope their guys like Cam Newton, Melvin Gordon, hopefully they can get healthy and get ready to go, so that way they can run wild throughout the playoffs. The Prime Timers, they're one that could actually really benefit from that preemptive pickup of a Josh Allen, just in case Cam Newton's shoulder is not actually okay. The Prime Timers are in prime position to take this week and see how Cam Newton's shoulder looks. He was subbed out on a Hail Mary attempt. That's not something you hope to see with a strong-armed quarterback like Newton. But if he's not okay this week, if he's throwing another 3-4 interceptions, and the Carolina Panthers look to be circling the drain a bit, Josh Allen makes a lot of sense for that pickup, for that playoff run, even in just for a Hail Mary play. So that wraps up our Week 13 episode for the L-Town Dynasty League Football Podcast. Once again, I'm Lou Brunson, and this has been brought to you by FFB Podcast. Good luck to all the teams throughout the fantasy football playoffs, and for those who are not in the playoffs, and good luck in 2019 as well.
That concludes this episode. Follow us on Twitter at FFBcast and email your questions to ffbcast@gmail.com. See you next time for more fantasy greatness.